I do want to begin with a statement by Sims. And when I wrote that, I said, I'm just going to say Sims. This is the only group that would know who I mean. So, William Gilmore Sims, for the one person maybe by now who doesn't in our group. And so, this is the statement that I thought might be appropriate for our conference. One fine song will last when all the grave volumes of laws and histories will be forgotten. This is the power of poetry mated to melody. Sims knew this as a poet whose Irish father, a poet himself, came from the old Celtic tradition. William Walker was born in 1809. His father was a Welsh Baptist immigrant, and that means something for people who know Welsh Baptist. The father came from Wales, directly from Wales to Union District, South Carolina. Union District is about halfway between Columbia and Spartanburg, if you're trying to place it. His mother was a Jackson whose parents came from Ireland. The churches William attended felt music to be a major part of their worship. They were founded in the 1750s, and they left minutes for us. So we know that they appreciated music, and it's always in the minutes about music and musicians. Welsh Baptist churches on the Tiger River in Union District. Even more important than the Welsh Baptist hymns were the songs his mother sang to him. We know this from the footnotes to his collection, Southern Harmony. A note to one song says, "This is a very dear old tune to me. I learned it from the sweet voice of my dear mother, who now sings in heaven, when I was 3 years old." It's amazing. There are a lot of notes like that, 3 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old. To the hymn French Broad, he said, the air, used the term air, it's important, was learned at his mother's knee when he was 5 years old, hence 1814. He writes further, the words, quote, were composed in the fall of 1831 while traveling over the mountains on French Broad River. He was 22 years old, and his journey was dangerous. He was traveling to set up shake note singing schools in the remotest mountain communities of Appalachia. A good modern testament to his work is Doc Watson's music. Now, most of you know Doc Watson. Down to the River to Pray, it's one. He makes a beautiful tribute to Billy Walker by name, not just shape note singing. Watson paid touching tribute to Walker's formative influence. And in Appalachia, you find many people still knowing his name by remembering what grandfather said and great-grandfather said about seeing William Walker. We can return with young Walker on his solitary travels in fall 1831 and imagine how French Broad came into being. Riding alone in the chill of the approaching dark, the rhythm of his horse's feet called up from his childhood memories of his mother and the old tunes she taught him. His thoughts were on home and on his family in the lonely wilderness, especially at the times he feared he'd not make it back home, perhaps. This was tricky business. Then the words mated to the music as he looked down into the deep gorge where the river ran below. I think I've set that stage right. Now, I had to make this up in my mind. This is poetic license. But you can figure how that might work. A rhythmical motion of the horse's feet, remembering Mama, wanting to be back home maybe, hoping he'll get there. And then he looks down into this chasm. And this is the result. French Broad.
High o'er the hills the mountains rise, their summits tower toward the skies, but far above them I must dwell, or sink beneath the flames of hell. Oh, God forbid that I should fall and lose my everlasting home, but may I rise on wings of love and soar to the blessed world above. Although I walk the mountains high, ere long my body low must lie, and in some lonesome place must rot, and by the living be forgot. But if prepared, oh blessed thought, I'll rise above the mountain's top, and there remain forevermore on Canaan's peaceful, happy shore.
Well, what a powerful song. Young fella, very serious. That line, he says, I may fall and nobody will ever know where my bones are. This is a real possibility. Have you crossed the French Broad River between North Carolina and Tennessee? Woo. By himself. Nobody knows he's there. No cell phone. No MS. No. Oh, well. I better not elaborate. We'll be here till 9 o'clock. So it's natural, I think, kind of bouncing off Alan's lecture, that so many of Walker's hymns were about traveling home. Many. Of this condition, he made the emblem of a longing for man's heavenly home in his Father's house, where he would be reunited with his family, and there would be no more travails, trials, or weariness. He got tired. It's a tiring thing. The root of the word travel, after all, is travail. That heavenly home is best described in his hymn, Sweet Prospect, which is on that long tape. My favorite lines in Sweet Prospect. This is heaven. Sweet fields arrayed in living green and rivers of delight. Alan said, not a city. Here we have a specific sweet fields arrayed in living green. I think they're Irish green too. But I look out at that same landscape. My house is on the other side of the Tiger River from where Billy Walker was born. So I see that green landscape, and I know that river very well. I canoe it and I fish it. So I feel very close. I feel very close to William Walker for a number of reasons. It's clear that Walker was bringing the old Celtic music to the new land. The tunes to many hymns are now identified as variants of Irish and Scoto-Irish reels. George Pullen Jackson noted that Walker was the first in the United States to write down many Celtic tunes, and he was the means by which this music traveled west through the Southern Harmony. Walker published his Southern Harmony collection from Spartanburg in 1835 at the age of 26. Okay. It sold over 800,000 copies. It's estimated that 1 out of every 7 households in the United States had a copy by the year 1854. Nothing like this has ever happened again. And this figure would have been much larger in the South. We're talking about the whole United States. So 1 out of 7. We need to say a little more about Walker's life. He married in 1833 after moving to Spartanburg. So when he's making that trek over the French Broad River, he's by himself. He's not married. He's lost a lot of people, and he's pretty much by himself. His future is very uncertain at that time. Married 1833, he raised 10 children, operated a bookstore, helped found Wofford College, and was known for his private library and knowledge of literature. He knew poetry very well, and people came to him and said, "Who wrote this?" He could identify the poetry. So we're not talking about some rustic, okay, which is fine too. But this is a man with a large library, a founder of a college, and a great knowledge of literature. Wofford has done him proud. They have a Shape Note sing every year, and they sing one of the songs at his grave at Magnolia Cemetery. Very quietly done. You probably didn't know that. Not a one of you knew that. That's okay. He's ours. We take care of our own, or try to. All right. There were 3 William Walkers in Spartanburg District. One was a pig farmer. They called him Hog Billy. His son, they called Pig Billy. To distinguish our subject, they called William Singing Billy. And so that's how he got his name. Hog Billy, Pig Billy, and Singing Billy. I think that's wonderful. During the war, Singing Billy nursed the Confederate wounded. He met Stonewall Jackson in Richmond and learned that his Jackson mother and Stonewall Jackson were kin. Jackson's favorite hymn, How Firm a Foundation, as you know, was in Southern Harmony in 2 versions, and the second version was expanded by William Walker. So we've got a shorter version and a longer version, and I'd love to know which version Stonewall Jackson liked. They had a lot to talk about, more than their kinship. In 1862. So most people don't know that. He and Jackson got to be good friends. They probably sang together. I would imagine he did. Walker survived the war. In 1866, he published his second hymnal, The Christian Harmony. Okay, so you got 2 to remember. The Southern Harmony, 1835. The Christian Harmony, 1866. There were 52 pieces with his name, up from the 25 in Southern Harmony. 52 pieces. He died in Spartanburg in 1875 at the age of 66. The obituary said that this was no extraordinary man. They knew what they had. I've said that wrong. I don't have it in front of me. No ordinary man. And I'm going to say they did not know how extraordinary he was. I got that right. I saw the puzzlement on your face. Thank you. Well, the people in Spartanburg understood that they had someone special. He must have had a great sense of humor. He told his children that all I want on my gravestone is A.S.H., author of Southern Harmony. He said, I'd rather have that after my name than in front of my name, P.R.E.S., President. This, you can imagine at that time, especially. So that's what you'll find at Magnolia Cemetery. William Walker, A.S.H. It's helpful to contrast the most famous American poet of William Walker's time, Walt Whitman. Now, he wasn't that famous then, but now we'll say he's considered the great American poet, contemporary to Singing Billy. So let's do that. Most of you know Whitman. You have to. That's what you get in school. You don't get anything else, you get Walt Whitman. So, Whitman's Song of Myself begins. I sing myself and celebrate myself. And what I assume you should have seen, right? Leaves of Grass celebrates the egocentric and the narcissistic. Whitman says he's the new Christ for the new Adam. He's writing you the new Bible. I mean, he says it. His poem is man-centered secular. The stark contrast with Walker becomes even more revealing. And I think they're registers of their two parts of the country, if you think about it. For Walker, the afterlife, a lot of his songs, singing communally into eternity. Singing communally into eternity the praise of his Creator, who made him. Right? So, Whitman, he's called the solitary singer. You know, it comes out of his poetry. A solitary singer. Whitman, the solitary singer, sings of himself to himself and as a representative of an increasingly man-centered, I-centered materialism in which man becomes his own God. With Walker, there is absolutely no confusion of who is the creator and who is the created. No confusion there. So this leads to Walker's Amazing Grace. This is how some of you might know him. He's the first to make the tune and the words together. I'll attempt now to unfold the story of that probably most recognizable hymn in the world right now. So I'll do the best I can in the short time that I have to tell you the story of Amazing Grace. During his lifetime, Walker was best known for Southern Harmony, his Southern Harmony songbook. The words and tune of Amazing Grace were first married and published there in Southern Harmony. It's one of the most important books in our history of music. Amazing Grace may be the single most recognizable, best-loved song worldwide. I tried to find a more well-loved, recognizable, favorite song, and I couldn't, especially in the last 30 years. So in a sense, Walker is among America's most famous creative artists. If you go back to Sims and his comment that one poem is going to outlast all the volumes of history and laws and whatever else. Think about that. Even though I think he's not, most people wouldn't recognize his name still. We know Amazing Grace, but we don't ever often attach William Walker's name to it. I'm Lutheran, and our hymnal had Amazing Grace in it, but it took until 1991 for his name to appear as the arranger, and he's credited with it. The tune is New Britain, which William Walker named. And Don has told me Britain was the old word for Scotland. Am I right? Am I quoting you correctly? No. Well, Why did you tell me that? What is how does that work, Don? You tell us.
I don't remember the conversation.
Well, that's all right. It ain't New England. It's New Britain, which would include Scotland, I suppose.
I see what you mean, yes.
Yeah, maybe that's what we were talking about.
No reference to the
He's the namer of the tune. In other words, there was no tune named New Britain. And that was the tune he picked up and then gave it that name. So you'll find Amazing Grace tune New Britain. It's called New Britain, but not New England. So, okay, so that's sort of my point. He was very much aware of his Welsh Baptist and Irish background, his Welsh and Irish background. And I wouldn't see him calling that New England. The Welsh and the Irish were not too friendly with the English at that time. Why did they leave Wales? And why did they leave Ireland after all? So you've got a very strong Scots-Irish component in Union County. I know the Jeters and the Hardys and you can just name them all. But Walker didn't make it on Bill Moyer's PBS series. There was, I think, it was over a decade ago, there was a 4-part series on Amazing Grace. Bill Moyer's. You can probably find it. His name was not mentioned. The documentary focused on John Newton. Okay, he's the author of the words. Should. Newton was an Englishman who'd been the captain of a slave ship, but he, what's the right word, did due penance for that, and they made him then an object of, okay, your guilt should lead you to be forever repentant, and basically he was. Newton became a Calvinist-style minister and spread the word. He was a zealous, fanatical Calvinist minister and an abolitionist. And so you see, as an abolitionist, he's good fodder for a lot of programs. So Newton is known, and Moyers really played it up. They probably spent 30 minutes on Newton and his recanting and his breastfeeding and so forth and so on and on and on. Okay. He wrote the words then that became the text in 1772, but there was no established tune for it. They were good words. They still are good words, but there was no tune. In England, somebody tried to set it to the melody of Hephzibah. This is the way it was first sung. It was first sung in England with the tune Hephzibah. I've heard it. You don't want to hear it. In the eastern United States in the early 1800s, there were no less than 10 tunes with the words by Newton, all less than memorable. So I tried to pick out the one that you can listen to without screaming, and I have it for you. It's set, the words are set to the tune Jewett, Jewett, and if you know Jewett, that's a very good New England name, maybe.
Amazing grace, how sweet the song that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost,
Kind of catchy, in a Broadway sense. Here come the Can-Can girls. They're the words. Where did those words come from? Shout, shout for glory. Made up.
Shout for glory.
kind of getting used to it now. I kind of like it. Kind of. It's not bad. It goes on for 4 more verses. You want to hear them? Let's do away with that. Pardon?
Is this before Southern Harmony?
Before?
Jewett, putting the words to Jewett, is that before Southern Harmony?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There were 10 versions of Amazing Grace in America with different tunes, and I kind of like that one. That's the best of the lot. But it's not Amazing Grace. I was trying to say, I would choose Jewett. You can probably find you can find Hepzibah on that magic machine. You can find all these others and see what you think. Okay? It's interesting to know that Newton never heard the familiar Amazing Grace as we know it today. He died before he heard the song as we know it today. Then enters Walker. Okay. No later than 1834, at the age of 25, he polished up and altered a tune called Harmony Grove out of Virginia, in the Virginia hymnal. And that's closer. So that's closer, but it's still not there. He set Newton's words to a polished up and changed Harmony Grove for the first time. The first publication of Amazing Grace, complete with its new tune, came the following year at Southern Harmony. What's the date? 1835. Walker gave the tune and song the name New Britain, which we've talked about. I think the tune is still known by that name today if you're in musicology. I find it significant that the Welsh and Irish descended Walker chose that name because it had not been used. He made that name himself. Okay. I surmise that Walker understood the Celtic roots of the tune. Those people who've looked at the tune today have said it's Scottish, pentatonic scale, and that's why pipe bands really take to it. So it's likely Scottish. Now, I'm not sure exactly how William Walker first heard it. He heard it likely in Spartanburg County. Fullest go to Irish, and Scots. In 1844, Walker's brother-in-law from Spartanburg, now living in Georgia, again published New Britain with the words by Newton in his offshoot popular hymn book entitled The Sacred Harp. And in Georgia, shape note singing is usually named shape harp singing. Okay. This became the shape note hymnal best known in Georgia and was said to be the primary means by which the hymn spread to the northern states, where it became associated very strongly with the abolition movement because of Newton. Newton, as we know, was a repentant slave trader. Now, here comes Harriet Beecher Stowe. All of you've read Uncle Tom's Cabin. How could you not? You're in an American university or college, okay? She referred to the song in Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852. She added a verse to it. That 10,000 years, we've been there 10,000 years. William Walker did not write that. Isn't that interesting? In 1861, the song became popular in the North and was associated with the Union cause in its war on the South. It was included in the Northern hymnals. It was included in Hymns for the Camp. You'll find it there. The Soldier's Hymn Book. The Union supplied the soldiers with two things: a New Testament and that hymnal that had Amazing Grace in it. The Walker version came to England only in the late 19th century. With the growth of the recording industry, the hymn's popularity spread worldwide 2 recordings out of hundreds may be mentioned as historically significant. The first was by Judy Collins, and some of you have heard it, I'm sure. It made the pop charts in both the United States and Britain in 1971. That's the date. This exemplified the crossover from gospel and folk music to pop that we've been talking about. This is a really good example. The second recording was a recording by the pipe and drums of the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards, the best, in 1972. All right, Judy Collins, 71, Royal Scots, 1972. This recording has led to pipe bands all over the world making the tune their own. And you hear weddings, funerals, just about once a week I hear Amazing Grace with a pipe band. The year 2002 was a very important year for Amazing Grace. A London musicologist by the name of Steve Turner, very well known, wrote a book called Amazing Grace, the Story of America's Most Beloved Song. Bet nobody's ever heard of that. Well, we should. Turner related that some today say it's an old Scottish tune. Others say that it's a Southern plantation melody. Turner reasons that it's probably both. Well, makes sense. An old Scots melody taken to the plantation South by Scots immigrants. Turner reasoned further that the southern geographical area associated with the tune's source contained a high percentage of Scots and Scoto-Irish immigrants. Was that ever an understatement for my part of the world? I think it's mostly 99.9%. So there we have William Walker born into an area that, okay, it would have been natural for the people to know that tune. But then there's the question, why don't we find it in Scotland? Which we don't. Well, he offered the possible answer, which I think is very plausible, that the Highland clearances, which depopulated entire areas of Scotland to America and other places, did away with it. I think that's very plausible. You talk about depopulation, and so the song came here and it survived here, like the people did. The people and the songs go together, and the songs help the people survive. And they held on to that song, and I bet you, this is again another surmise, I bet Singing Billy Walker heard it in Spartanburg District. There's another musicologist you need to know about. His name is Peter van der Merwe. He's argued that it's an overwhelmingly Scottish tune, and he talks about the pentatonic scale and how this tune is rendered in a particularly Scottish way. If you want to look that up, it's in Turner on page 123, and he has an elaborate musical rendering of how this works, and I can't follow it all, but some of you might be able to. Turner feels that the fact that the pipe bands all over the world have made the tune their own reinforces the idea of a Scottish origin. I think that's right. It's perfectly suited to a pipe band. Why? Scots has pentatonic scale. Now, we go up to the 1960s. During the Civil Rights campaign, the song became associated with the Civil Rights movement. This was a focus of the Bill Moyers PBS documentary. That was at least an hour. Okay. And it should be there. But it was done to the extent that one came away with the feeling that the song had African American origins. And this has been kind of picked up so that I heard on TV the other week that Amazing Grace was sung on the slave ships coming over. My mouth fell open when I heard that. They might have been on the slave ships going back, but not coming over. Anyway, I don't want to go too far. Turner found it ironic that a hymn written by a white captain in the slave trade would be so used. And I want to add that it was first arranged and published by an unrepentant Southern slave owner who nursed Confederate soldiers. Walker owned slaves and never apologized or felt guilt for it. Well, don't let that out or Amazing Grace will go. Right? That's not popular. But, okay. In other words, there's a lot of baloney out there on Amazing Grace. And Bill Moyers was largely responsible for it in a 4-part PBS series. And I was so innocent at the time, I did not know much about singing Billy Walker. And I took it bait, line, sinker. I figured, well, it's Bill Moyers on PBS. Watch out for PBS. I have a friend that calls it Pinko Broadcasting System. PBS can be good, and it can be very, very, very bad. I love Downton Abbey. I don't know how that made it. Anyway, the song's popularity shows no signs of diminishing. For example, I love Celtic Thunder, the Irish Tenors, Celtic Women. They all do Amazing Grace. I've never seen a Celtic Thunder, Celtic Woman, Celtic whatever. It's Celtic everything. And it's all, I mean, they've got an industry, haven't they? You can even river dance to Amazing Grace. It's strange stuff going on there. But it's so popular, you see. That my point is, it's an extremely popular song. And if you have to name one song worldwide that's the most popular and most beloved, I can't think of a better. And man, think about it and tell me. Because I don't want to be mouthing this stuff off, and it might be something, Hare Krishna or something, that's really good out there. You know, I like some of those tunes. But I don't think other people know them. I like all music. And I try to keep up with all music. But I don't know another song that is more well-known worldwide. Now, we're not talking about just the U.S. Now, think about that. Old Lang Syne. It's okay. I mean, people know that. But I was just puzzling. Can anybody say something from the audience there of one? What?
Christmas Carol.
A Christmas Carol. Which one? Silent Night. You know, that could be a good runner-up, if not better. Silent Night. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My Lutheran heritage would applaud that. I can do it for you in German if you want to hear it. Steal the Night. No, we don't go there. I think I got a puzzle about possibilities there before I write this up. I want to publish this. You don't want to put things in print that... Anyway. Now, this is only half the story. The second half is less inspiring. Turner's book outlines the progress, or some might say degradation, of Walker's song. Turner related that the defining moment of change came in the year 1900 when Chicago hymn writer Edwin Excell muted the theology and modernized the tune, moving it a long way from its shape note roots to make it comfortable for the new urban industrial middle class. Excell dropped Newton's final stanza, which is in Billy Walker, and substituted the now familiar "When We've Been There 10,000 Years," straight out of Harriet Beecher Stowe. until Excel included it in 1900. The Stowe verse had never appeared in a hymn book. It was in Uncle Dom's cabin, but it was never in a hymn book. So that's 1900. Turner explained that the emphasis in the song thus shifted from God to man, no longer focusing on God choosing people, but on people choosing good works. The new final verse made the hymn less likely to offend what he calls new American sensibilities. As Turner puts it, Excel's change was a key step in the gradual transformation of the hymn into a secular self-help anthem. I love that phrase, a self-help anthem. When Judy Collins, Joan Baez, and Arlo Guthrie were popularizing the hymn in secular circles, the human potential movement was in full flower, with the words God and Lord now entirely missing from the text. There was nothing to keep the new generation of the 1960s from treating grace as a term for the way that life seems to heal and reward those who pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and start all over again. Joni Baez. We used to call her Little Joni Phony. I don't know if you've ever heard that. My college roommate from the Citadel called her Little Joni Phony, and I never knew what he meant. I kind of like Joan Baez. I like folk music. But Joan Baez, in an interview with Turner in 2001, declared she couldn't understand why anyone would think Amazing Grace was a religious song. They've taken God out of it, and they've replaced man. So she was mystified, and I think she was being honest. She was mystified by the assertion. This then was the slippery slope from Stowe and the northern man-centered isms and ologies of the 1850s that removed God from the final stanza and made man the supreme focus. Remember Walt Whitman? Back around. Turner's volume has an interesting analysis of the difference between Judy Collins' a cappella recording, just good, except for the words, and Aretha Franklin's gospel rendition. And I haven't heard that yet. I want to. One night in New York, when Collins sat in an encounter group when the rage was getting out of hand, in order to calm things down, she began to sing the song she'd known from her Methodist childhood. It worked. Her music producer, who was in the group, got her to include it in her next album. Says Turner, this was Collins' reinterpretation of the song born out of the human potential movement. On another night in Watts, Aretha Franklin recorded a gospel album live at New Temple Missionary Baptist Church. Collins took 4 minutes to sing 4 stanzas. Aretha Franklin took 14 minutes for 2. Turner comments, it's beautiful. Franklin's version went back to the long style of the holiness churches where the tune is pulled apart wide enough to let the spirit in. That's a nice phrase from an Englishman. In gospel music, the point is not clarity and precision, but faithfulness to the movement of the Spirit. And as such, he said, Aretha Franklin and William Walker, they're brother-sister. William Walker and Collins ain't. It's a really good paragraph. You need to read that. I won't quote it all. Turner has great and fulsome praise for Walker's marriage of words and tune as, I'm going to quote, real genius. It was a marriage made in heaven. It was as though the tune had been written with these words in mind. The music behind Amazing had a sense of awe to it. The music behind Grace sounded graceful. There was a rise to the point of confession, as though the author was stepping out into the open and making a bold declaration. but a corresponding fall when admitting his blindness. He goes on another page. This is sensitive understanding. One last section on American music history is in order here, and I'll stop. I agree with Joel Cohen. Do you know Joel Cohen? Any of you? He's the music director of the Boston Camerata. You should know him. He's really good. Folk music, early music. This is what he said. Our music history has been written wrong, and our past has been denied. He cited as an example the highly respected Grove's Dictionary of Music. It's sort of the standard encyclopedia of music. Grove complains that early 19th century hymn books of the less learned type, learned type, they were crude, but they did prepare the way for better, later artistic enterprises. It's Grove, Encyclopedia of American Music. Grove felt the early folk music was so trivial that he decided to attempt no summary of it. You won't find it. You won't find anything we've been doing here this week. Cohen noted that Grove makes no mention of either William Walker or Southern Harmony, and concluded, quote, "Our official music history has misled us. The finest of the wheat has too often been thrown aside, and much energy is spent cataloging and canonizing the chaff." Americans awake. This is Cohen. Americans awake. The media, the fake media, no, he didn't say fake media. The media and the official circuits of distribution often ignore what is best in our musical heritage, and the public has been miseducated to prefer counterfeit culture to the real thing. Way to go, Bostonian. So I can rephrase him a bit since we've had this week. We can rephrase, Cohen, if I can do this right. Thus, Americans have been miseducated to prefer counterfeit culture to the real Southern thing. Sounds a little like Clyde Wilson. I'll end with what is not counterfeit culture, but the real thing. And we'll give you the real thing. The performers here are Anonymous 4, some of you might know. They're an Atlanta choral group. Anonymous 4, the year 2003. It closely follows the words, tune, and fa sol la method of the original Amazing Grace. As close as I think we might get it. It's not my favorite recording of Amazing Grace, but it's closest. And they'll start with the shape note, what you do, doing the fa sol la note. So it's going to sound like a foreign language at first, but that's the fa sol la beginning. And then you'll hear the song itself. This is pretty close to the way it was performed. It leaves out that 10,000 years stanza and restores the William Walker 1835 version. So I'll play that and we'll end with that.
'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace has brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. The Lord has promised good to me, His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. The earth shall soon dissolve like snow, the sun forbear to shine, but God who called me here below will be forever mine.
Notice the end of that penultimate stanza, and grace will lead me home. Yeah. Do we have time for questions, or we?